So I'm hoping that today here, and I'm moving over to our esteemed panelists, and I have a declaration to make, seeing we're with auditors here, I must declare my conflict. I'm with Discovery. And I go to gym, Adrian, and I do train. Founder, chief executive of the Discovery Group. Launched it in 1992 with a simple and core purpose of making people healthier and enhancing and protecting their lives. Eh? Since evolved into a diversified and multinational financial services group. If you don't know Discovery, I'm sure you've been living somewhere else. Eh? Widely acknowledged as a global thought leader in wellness behavioral change and its integration with health, life, and short-term insurance. Listed on the JSE 1997, and under his leadership expanded its international reach to the United Kingdom, US, and China, generating total income flows in excess of 50 billion rand and over 8,000 employees. I went into your building and I realized just how big Discovery is. From outside it looks, okay, go around the corner. So Adrian kindly and very sensitively said, I'm not going to be speaking from the podium, and I didn't tell him to do that. He asked instead to have a discussion with the CEO of Nkonki, my sister in business here, Cindy Zilwa. So I'm going to ask you to please give a very enthusiastic auditor's welcome to Adrian Gore and Cindy Zilwa.
Thank you. Am I on? Morning, everyone, and a particular morning to you, Adrian, and welcome to our conference.
Thank you.
As you can see, when we invited you, we are more interested as the people who are fast-tracking thought leadership in the audit committee space to say some years back, you were indicating, and you still indicate that now, that if we get more discoverers, more entrepreneurs like you, we could create more jobs and be able to save South Africa from the problems that they are currently facing. Is that correct?
Sonia, it's absolutely correct. I mean, obviously I have a bias towards entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. I believe very strongly in them. But I think if you do the analysis, you will find that the only way to create jobs is entrepreneurship. You know, I kind of did this article and this study for the Sunday Times around trying to understand this dynamic. And the truth is, government generally doesn't create jobs. Big business tends to destroy jobs, you know. And if you know, it was an epiphany to me that if you think about a large corporation, to grow its top line faster than GDP is very difficult because it's a big part of the economy. So the only way to grow profits above inflation is to manage your cost base. Managing your cost base means driving down employment, or at least not trying to grow employment. So the only real drivers of growth are small businesses and entrepreneurship. So to an extent, my conclusion about that is not an emotional one, it's an intellectual one. But the only way to get job creation is you have to foster entrepreneurship. We need businesses that grow. We need an environment that's conducive to it. In addition to great government and great big businesses, you do need that.
That's exactly why we have you here today, because most people believe if we've got to come up with innovative businesses, entrepreneurship, governance will be able to impede that. And in South Africa, we're doing our best to make sure that we comply with the governance standards. We're actually leading the world when it comes to corporate boards and governance out of 148 countries in terms of the latest global competitiveness report. So it's something that we are actually happy with. But is it really true that governance will be able to impede entrepreneurship and innovation?
I must say,
just share with us your experience.
I don't believe that at all. I must say, I think good corporate governance is a critical support to entrepreneurship. In my own experience, if I think about starting Discovery, one of the, I think, lucky things that I had was at the start. I mean, we were a startup. I raised some seed capital from RMB in those days. This is like 1991, 92. And I began working at a desk and a chair. Right now, I guess left alone, I might have been successful. But the truth of it is, one of the breakthroughs we had was forming an executive committee. I use that term loosely because none of the people on it were executives, right? I was the only one, but I was surrounded by really smart people who'd done this before. Good governance, good challenge, external validation, all of those issues. And the truth of it is, I believe that's one of the fundamental reasons why we succeeded. We started out as a startup in scale, but a kind of an institutional governance framework. And to an extent, I think that has allowed us to scale fairly seamlessly. I'm often asked this question: how do you manage as an entrepreneur to scale and not have the business outgrow you, in a sense? Because often you see in entrepreneurship, kind of the management take it to a certain point, but they can never quite get it to that next level. I would argue it was the governance and the enabling environment that we created at the outset. So I must say, I mean, obviously, it's an institutional business, insurance. You know, it's different to opening a cafe or a spaza shop or whatever it might be. But I still think that a startup with a mindset of good governance is far better placed to succeed, grow, and repeat its success than just a startup who's kind of cavalier, trying to make a quick buck. I don't think that that's sustainable.
But then, if you just go back and take a step back, most companies believe governance impedes them. So how has Discovery mastered the balance between growth and scaling up? And you have not only done that locally, but you've also done it internationally. There are many countries that you've tapped into: China, Singapore, UK, and yet you are also expanding in South Africa, and you've got strict governance rules and principles. So how can you share to have been, how have these gone hand in hand?
You know, I'd say to you, I hope I don't sound cavalier, I'd say to you that kind of a tick box governance impedes growth and entrepreneurship. I think it impedes any progress. So if you have an audit committee or a board that is simply there ticking boxes and trying to kind of, how can I say, impose a set of compliance rules that don't really fit, I think that's difficult. I would say to you that in our case, I think firstly something that I believe very strongly in is a culture of embracing external validation, embracing the challenge. So right from the outset, something I did with our leadership team was to say to them that you should value external and internal audit. Maybe they'll pick up something wrong. See it as an asset of the business, that you're a third party looking in and giving you advice. So from the outset, I think that what's critical in an organization is create a culture of embracing external validation. If you do the opposite, and I think many companies do that, they see internal audit or the audit committee as a sort of an unwelcome check on them, and they're hiding stuff. I mean, excellent opening remarks. They're hiding that baby for 8.99 months, right? if that's the case, then I think you get a very bad result. From the outset, you get kind of a brinkmanship, you know, between management and the NEDs and the audit committee and all of those structures. So I think at the outset, a culture of how can I say, a culture of valuing external validation is critical. The second thing I think what we've done well is the audit committee, and you've been part of that, is a mix of skills in that audit committee that I think are not just looking to tick boxes, that are looking at the business objectives, that have a deep understanding of the growth objectives, of the product complexities that come out of the business. And so I think that the mix of the audit committee is fundamental. So to an extent, at the get-go of a business, it's critical to get the right values and cultures in place. If you force on it an external audit committee that's in a governance structure that's out to catch out the management, I think you then get a brinkmanship that leads to destruction or impedes growth. So it requires leadership on both sides, you know, on kind of the non-executive side and the management of the executive side. If you get that right, I don't see any ability to impede, quite the opposite. You've got smart people, you've got independent people, and you've got people navigating with you the most complicated regulations. I mean, we're in the UK now, as you know. The new Twin Peaks regulation around the FCA and what that means. It is if you think regulation is difficult here, and we complain here about, you go to the UK insurance markets, they're unbelievably tough. So I must say, so I'm being a bit long-winded here. My experience is that the right culture, the right mix, a long-term view, and not a tick-box culture, allows you to grow. In fact, I think enables you to grow.
I think there are 2 points I would like to follow up. I think the first one is welcoming external audit, internal audit, and audit committee input as an external validation process to make sure that you're in the right track. But I think the problem is that most entrepreneurs become very defensive. They become very protective of the territory. So what you are saying then is that you know yourselves to be excellent entrepreneurs, you're growing the business, but you are humble enough to be able to get input and be able to welcome anyone who's pointing you to the blind spots. But that's very difficult to achieve. How did you manage to achieve that humility? I will call it humility.
I mean, I think on the surface it looks like humility. In truth, I think if you're smart, it's actually not arrogance. It's kind of, it's greed. You know, because I think if you're smart, you know that external people with external experiences and different views add huge value to a business. So if you ask me, I would certainly not invest or back an entrepreneur who thinks he or she knows it all. I like the kind of person who actually it's not just humility, is smart enough to know that you listen more than you talk. You know, there's always stuff coming in. So to an extent, I mean, that to me is a test of leadership and management. We've had some managers who've resisted internal audit. I can tell you now, we had one in particular who, for the first time in the evolution of discovery, I found he was fighting with the internal audit area, and there was always issues. This guy's caused problems from us in every role he's done, frankly. You know, we've had to kind of get rid of him because you know, that mindset is a problem. So, I hear you, it's humility, and I appreciate you being way too kind. I think that I think a shrewd entrepreneur values external view. You know, I do a lot of mentoring of entrepreneurs, and one of the first things I say is get yourself an advisory board or an executive, whatever you call it, do whatever you like, but get a bunch of external people in to help you figure this stuff out. And it's amazing how few entrepreneurs actually realize how obvious that is. I think the same in, obviously governance issues and whatever, but in big government departments, big businesses, having an advisory board, having a group of people that you can bounce ideas off, it's an unbelievable treat. It's a gift. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't see it as a check. And I found it might sound Machiavellian. When you defend, you're putting yourself at risk. Whenever you defend something, there's a risk that you'll lose that battle. I don't see why you should do that. So, listen, I actually don't know the answer. What do you think? You know, who knows what comes out?
That's good. I think, ladies and gentlemen, for this rare attribute that Discovery and Adrian has in terms of being smart enough to value input from internal auditors and the audit committee, he deserves a big round of applause. And I need a second round of applause, especially from the internal auditors and the CAEs who are in the room. The manager who was fired for not listening to internal auditors, for giving them a hard time. I need a big round of applause for that. Then the other point I would like to follow up, Adrian, on what you said earlier on, is the balance of skills that you actually have. On the survey that we actually did here, listening to most of the audit committee experts, people who have chaired audit committees for more than 10 years, and also from the 360-degree feedback from the stakeholders. Everyone is talking about the balance of skills, because the mistake that happens is that people tend to say CAs will sit as audit committee members only, and yet the companies in the insurance space and the companies in the banking skills, and maybe none of the CAs have got that kind of background and expertise. You seem to have dealt with it differently at Discovery. For instance, in you expanding internationally, you even have international directors who will be sitting in your audit committee. Can you just elaborate more on that and also communicate the benefit that that has? Because maybe even this issue of entrepreneurs not being smart enough, it's done by the fact that they believe the input they get from the people, it's irrelevant because they don't understand their business. So it's easier to just say, you don't know what I'm doing, I know what I'm doing. But in your case, you surrounded yourself with skill such that you know that when those people are talking, you have to listen as being part of that equation of being smart. Can you just elaborate more on those benefits?
Well, I think if you start with the culture of wanting that validation, then it sets you on a journey of seeking out the best, most diverse people to help you figure it out. So in our case, the audit committee, I mean, it's a very actuarially intense business, as you know. So our audit committee is chaired by, in fact, a British actuary because of our British exposure, and we have very strong, experienced people as audit committee members, as you are, and we're grateful to you for it. And I think the mix of skills, the audit committee itself, aside the people in attendance of the meeting, is a very broad church of people with different skills. And in my experience, and you would know it being there, I think, there are no sacred cows. You know, anything can be debated. And one example I do know, one of our very complicated product structures where we sell these capital bonds into the markets, are really lump sum investments that are at good rates of interest for investors. It's one of the ways where we raise capital because the money coming in, we invest, and there's a whole release of it. It's a very complicated structure. Now, it's a fairly simple thing conceptually, But to actually carry it out is very complex. Now, we've got a very smart team. I'm particularly proud of our team. Yet our audit committee picked up an exposure in if interest rates really fluctuate and lapse rates go up. It was the most kind of obscure issue that the audit committee, our chairman, plus you, plus others, raised. We never thought of that issue. And I tell you, it set us on a journey of complete and total discovery, excuse the pun, of trying to understand the complexity of this thing and understanding how we invest, how we match the assets and liabilities. It's a very, very unconventional structure. So to an extent, the audit committee, in our case, has got skills that are unbelievably on top of our business, to an extent that they collectively have the ability to spot issues, And my advice to our audit committee chairman when I meet with him is, there are no sacred cows. He'll come and say, I'm worried about this. I said, dig as deep as you like. There are no, check it out. Go and see, So to an extent, the culture and the search of good people has been at the core of, I think, not only our success, but in fact, averting potential disaster, which is to an extent what the audit committee should do. And I think we followed that model internationally, where our audit committees across the board have very, very able chairpersons on those committees. We're trying to cross-pollinate between, our British audit committee meeting with the South African audit committee, our non-execs being on other boards in the group. So getting that cross-fertilization, I think, gives you the ability at the audit committee to make sure that the skills are not foreign to the business. They're quite the opposite. They know every issue of the business. They know what's going on. I think that's critical. I do think if you have an audit committee or a non-executive who is disconnected from the business, it is difficult. I think if their comments are completely are ridiculous and they're wasting time. Over time, I think the management will lose faith in that structure. So I think sort of the quid pro quo for having a culture of external validation is having external validation being qualified, that the comments are real and proper. So it's not an easy process. I think you've got to invest time and people and good faith and communication. And I can tell you, and I hope that we can continue it, it's been an amazing, an amazing asset of the business.
That's very good. I think there are two takeaway points from what you've just said. But ladies and gentlemen, somebody is not going to do this if I don't do it for myself. Did you hear him saying I'm one of the experienced members? Can you give me a big round of applause? But then the takeaway points, the two takeaway points I'm referring to is that the first one is the culture within the organization. It is the culture, we'll call it a culture of receptiveness. Because no matter how good an experience you can have, people from outside, if the culture internally is not going to be receptive, it's not going to work. And then the second one is that once you have this culture of receptiveness and you are ready to get external validation, then that helps you to be able to identify the skill that you're actually looking for. It's not something that you make a ticker box. How many people do we need? We need 3. Who can we easily get? Tick, tick, we've got 3. No one must give us a problem. But you know that you want to get something out of this, and therefore you go out of your way to start to identify the relevant skill, the relevant expertise, and know that there are no sacred cows. I think it's a very good, lesson that most companies, I think, are actually failing to do. Because the moment there is no culture of receptiveness, and the moment there is no excellent people who will be, whose input will be valued, then the whole thing falls flat. I think it's a very good thing. Let's give him a big round of applause. You better get your hands ready. Whenever I'm rounding out of points, I will say round of applause. Now the next point, Adrian, and I'm just going to put this question very, very simply, and I would like you to answer it more in an advisory format. How should we govern for innovation? As South Africa, we need growth. We need to be innovative in order to achieve that growth and be able to create those jobs. And as South Africa, we still need to maintain our first position when it comes to corporate governance and boards and standards of reporting and auditing everywhere in terms of, the global competitiveness report. How should we govern for innovation? What is it that you can say to advise people in the room? Because we have got CEOs, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got CFOs, we've got auditors, we've got external auditors and audit committee members. So with this audience, what is it that needs to be done?
Sure, it's a very broad question.
That's why I said it's simple, but the answer need not to be simple at all.
Can I unpack it a bit?
Yes, please.
Firstly, to make the point, this is my personal view. Innovation is fundamental. I I think that it's like the culture of receptivity. I think as auditors, as audit committee members or whatever, as board members, I think accepting that innovation is fundamental is crucial. If you don't innovate, what are you doing? What are you doing at the office every day? That's what society demands of us. They demand solutions to problems. And those solutions come through innovation. They're not asking us to cut costs and boost profits. I mean, you can do that and you'll be a hero for a while, but I reckon that you, certainly in an environment of high unemployment, I don't think that's what we need. We need innovative businesses. You know, if Steve Jobs was South African, we've done the numbers. There's no reason why he shouldn't have been, you know. He didn't have any great technology. It was an MP3 player, his iPod, that he initially developed. You know that if Apple was South African, our GDP would be, I think, 25% higher. It's a remarkable figure, you know. So one individual with innovation can change the world, you know. And I'm a great believer in the Schumpeter, the economist Schumpeter's view of creative destruction, that a business's role is to innovate. That is our social role. And so to an extent, this is my perspective, and I hope I'm not insulting here. I think oftentimes business leaders, not just audit, I'm not suggesting just non-execs or audit committee members, think that innovation is one of those things we might do one day, you know, and if it comes along, complicated, and this might create risk. You've branded the culture of receptivity. I'm not sure how to brand it here, but I think there's got to be a culture of embracing and encouraging innovation. That's the first point. The second point is that we need to, in my mind, separate the idea that innovation is cavalier. I think oftentimes, you know, financial people and people in the governance role think that innovation implies change implies a risk, you know, and innovation almost has this cavalier, let's not do that now, these are difficult times. That's not the case. Innovation should be about prudence. If I look at Discovery's innovations, they were all about making things more prudent. I mean, our first breakthrough was medical savings accounts. Medical savings accounts was the fundamental reason how we got into the market and how we brought healthcare costs down. It was a simple idea that when people spend their own money on healthcare, they behave differently. I mean, that's not a very complicated concept, right? I mean, think about how ludicrous healthcare is in an old-style medical aid scheme. You pay your money to the medical aid, and you go into the healthcare system, consume what you like, and send the bill in. It's like going to pick and pay. Can you imagine if you paid for groceries like this? Every month you paid a fee, and then any time of the day, you can go into the store, fill up your trolley, and walk out. That's how healthcare was funded, right?
I think it's a good idea. Can we ask Pick and Pay to be fee-based, monthly fee-based than trolley-based?
I support it fully. But I can tell you the price of food would be triple what it is today, right? Because you'd take prawns, not bread, you know, if you weren't paying for it. So our breakthrough was a simple idea of, for controllable healthcare expenses, you know, let people, make people prudent consumers. So that the core of the innovation was about prudence, not cavaliership. If I look at Vitality, it was about incentivizing change to make people healthier, to keep the risk pool intact, to bring claims costs under control. Every innovation we've done, I would argue, has created a culture of innovation and has lowered our risk as an organization. Does that mean it doesn't present massive risks at the audit committee level, as you know well? These are all complicated products. They involve all control, system changes, launches, actuarial risk, financial risk, you know, insurance risk, you know, liquidity issues, everything on all these dashboards. But a culture of accepting that's what society needs, a culture of accepting that that's the right thing to do, sets everyone on a journey that is a constructive one. And the last point I'd make, this is my own personal view, it's an interesting thing, is sequencing innovation versus governance. My sense of it is that if you think that governance is to catch innovation on the back end, then I think you've got a bad culture. If you realize that innovation follows good governance, that's my experience, I see that innovation and governance are bedfellows because you can't be innovative. You don't, as a leader, as a CEO, it's difficult to think about new ideas when you're worried about the back end, you know, that things are going to fall over. So the only time you have the corporate energy to attempt these things is when your governance is in check. So to an extent, the energy to innovate only comes from knowing that the audit committee is ticking everything off, saying, we're comfortable, you can move forward. You know, it's almost like the battleships, you know, off the coast as the soldiers land. If you know they're there and they're backing you, you can do things. So to my mind, I hope I'm not sounding, I hope it's clear what I'm saying. I think the traditional view that innovation and governance are not consistent, I think is absolutely fundamentally wrong. And just an attitudinal change in leadership and audit committee leadership, I think creates a very different culture.
I think an excellent point is the fact that governance and innovation should be partners. They are bedfellows, as we are saying, because most businesses or entrepreneurs, they start to innovate, then governance says no. Or other companies are saying, because of the strict governance rules, you shall not come to us with an idea unless you've done 1, 2, 3, which is now actually impeding. Whereas if they go partnership, hand in hand, to say, how can it be done better to make sure that we do not compromise our control environment, we do not compromise our governance standards, then it's much, much better, which is actually a good thing. Ladies and gentlemen, do we think we're learning from this discussion? Good. We will be leaving some time for question, about 15 minutes for question, but there are two things. The other one you've already dealt with, which is the compliance by ticking the boxes, because Discovery is operating in a core regulatory environment that whether, forget the JSE listing, forget the King 3, you've got the FSB breathing, you've got the UK regulatory, so compliance, you could be overwhelmed by it. But as you are correctly saying, you are not overwhelmed because you are not using it as, let's tick this, let's tick that. You are saying it makes sense for our business to operate in this kind of environment, and therefore it becomes embedded in how you're actually doing things, rather than panicking that you won't be able to tick that box and therefore have that shotgun approach.
That's a critical point. If you look at our business, it's complex in a few, look, every business is complex, I do know that, but in our own case, the truth of it is our success has been about integration, right? So integrating health and life insurance, integrating wellness with mortality risk, All of these things mean that not only are we operating in highly regulated environments in and of themselves, we're actually integrating environments, which creates all kinds of complexities. So to an extent, I think the only remedy is you've got to immerse yourself in the regulations, in the laws, and the compliance issues. You've got to be absolutely meticulous. I've seen there are no shortcuts at all. My view is you've got to embrace them. My view is that you've got to work with your regulator so that he or she in their body believes you're a force for good in the environment, believes that you're compliant, believes that you're an asset. We were involved recently with one of our regulators, I think you know well, where there was an issue. I think we had the right to actually do something quite powerful for the organization. Our regulator was not comfortable. He said, this is not good. We don't like it, you can do it, but we'd rather you didn't. And our view was, we don't do it. If you look at our evolution of our business, we started out in 1992 with medical savings accounts, actuarially pricing risk, the use of brokers to sell insurance, completely different business model. In 1999, the new Medical Schemes Act came out and basically changed everything. The entire business model was gone. We really had a kind of a moment of truth. Either you're going to fail or you're going to embrace this new environment. It took us 2 years, anyone who's followed our history, of terrible fighting and court cases. And I learned in that process that, you embrace regulation, you embrace regulators, and the more you know, the better you can do. I think if you turn and run from regulation, or you try and take shortcuts, even philosophically, you will fail. Regulations are a manifestation of society's views of what society thinks is important. If you cut those corners, you will violate society. You might not get caught today or tomorrow, but ultimately the business will suffer. So our kind of ethos is about getting immersed in the regulations, trying to help form the regulations, helping the regulators with our data, with our statistics, and understanding at the end of the day the regulator's wish and desire is to an extent something you must respect, even if it's not written down. It's important that that's the partnership that you live with.
I think it's good, and the regulators would love to hear you talking like that, because on the 360-degree feedback that was actually done by the firm this year, most regulators were saying, we would like audit committees, now it's referring to audit committees, and the service providers, external auditors, internal auditors, to make sure that they also think about the consumer's interest, and not only wear the cap of saying, what is the company's interest, because there could be a conflicting situation of saying, if I want the company's interest first, I want to make maximum profit. But that doesn't necessarily mean you are going to be offering the consumers the service that you promised to give them. And sooner it would actually catch up with you. It's short term, as you are saying. This regulation, it's basically the voice, of the people who are actually your suppliers. So the more you do it in compliance, the more you're actually keeping your customers happy. So I think it's a very good attitude. It deserves a genuine round of applause, not because I'm thinking about what to say.
Mm.
I think we can take questions.
A
payment gap. So we have to take questions now from the audience. I still want to have somebody audit those membership. The gym, and I'm telling you, Adrian, people are going in there having breakfast, checking out. All right, 2 questions here. You need a mic, or are you mic'd already? Oh, there's a mic coming.
Very, very inspirational. There is a study out there by IBM that says the second most important stakeholder has jumped to the customer after the board because of governance. They were number 7 3 years ago. Given what you've talked about in terms of unlocking energy by sequencing innovation and governance, facing the moment of truth, being able to read the trends of changes and taking the right actions, what does that mean for you? Because I'm very proud of you as a South African company that's global.
Let's give that the pride. Big
Thank
round
you.
of applause.
Can we take the second question? Often these questions tend to be related. Could you please pose your question as well?
Okay.
And then Adrian can take both of them.
Okay. Thank you. Same sentiments, Adrian. You're just one of the young businessmen that we admire in this country. My question is very simple. I know that you're expanding into other countries, UK and the East and so forth. What assurance can you give South Africa that you will still find innovative products or services to still deliver and grow in this country? Are you going to be looking at innovative products, or are you going to go acquisition route? And I'm assuming that there are no competitors in the audience. Thank you.
Sorry, before, I think there's another
Is there a
question
third one?
there. Yeah.
All right, behind you. Oh, there you go. Yeah, 3 questions and then.
Hi, Adrian. I think just one question from my side. Do you believe the perceived lack of innovation amongst audit committee members can impede the success of an organization?
Sure.
Before you answer that, I just want to make a comment, because transformation is also very important to me and to all of us as we are sitting in this room. Discover is an innovative company, a fast-growing company, but it also supports transformation, because one of the audit firms that are auditing Discovery is Indyebo Consulting, which is headed by Ndumi Medupe. So I really had to mention that.
Amanda. All right, Adrian.
Sure, you overrate my memory. Let me try and unpack these.
Yeah.
I mean, the first question on stakeholders and their ranking. I think that an organization that doesn't see customers as their primary stakeholder is going to fail. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, it comes back to my point about innovation. That a business's role is to innovate for society, to solve people's problems. So forget all the mumbo jumbo we talk up here. The truth is, at the end of the day, if your products don't meet the needs of the people that you're serving, you will fail. In terms of the actual rating of stakeholders, it's very interesting. I mean, you would know this better than I do, but you have different flavors of capitalism. The US is very shareholder-centric. I think if you look at the Cadbury codes in the UK, it's more of a trade-off between individual, society, company, which I think we follow more, in our King code. I think Sarbanes-Oxley is much more around protecting shareholders to an extent, I think. So to an extent, I think that ranking these things in a strict governance sense is cultural. But the core role of a business, in my view, and I think that's an international quality, is customers come first. If you aren't meeting the needs of your customers and your employees, I think you will fail. And I think at the core of the organization should be a ruthless belief in how do we meet the needs of our customers and how do we back our employees. And if you can get that right, I think the governance will tend to follow. In the second question on innovation in South Africa, I need to say to you that our extension into other markets is based on patriotism. You need to know that. We're not a company trying to get a base in the UK or whatever that might be. There's nothing illegitimate about that, and that's fine. Ours is quite the opposite. We believe incredibly strongly that the laboratory, to an extent, that South Africa provides has let us innovate. And to an extent, we believe strongly South African companies can and should be winning and competing across the world. I've got a much more competitive view about our view of Africa. We're scared to be colonialists, and I think that's right. But to an extent, I think we should be much more aggressive. You know, accepting Nigeria is going to be a bigger economy than us. I mean, why? You know, go out there and compete and win, and make sure that South Africa is a winner in any market that we operate. The other point about South Africa is I think people underestimate the scale of our market at their peril. So if you look at our investment, I think 90% of our capital allocation currently, despite all of our stuff internationally, is back into the South African market. And if you look at the scale of our new business figures, take Discovery Life, you take those figures to MetLife in the US, AIA in Asia, they're amazed with the scale. This is a pretty big market, you know, and we should be proud of it. So there's no need to globalize unless you really have something that you think can repeat in scale. So the answer to you is yes, we are flat out investing, innovating, pushing. In fact, our biggest challenge is can we get our innovations here to work elsewhere, frankly. So this remains our bedrock. The third comment, I hope I'm not off key here, but I think audit committee members should be innovative. But I think to an extent there is a difference in my role between referee and player. You know, you don't want the referee to be taking the ball from the centre forward and dribbling it into the goal. You know what I'm saying? So to an extent, in the context of, if you're saying that audit committee members should be innovative in the context of how they go about their duties, how they interpret issues, how they respond, how they govern, how they comment, my answer would be yes. If you're saying the audit committee members should themselves be innovative in product ideas, and I think once you cross the line and you become a player, I think there could be a conflict. I think you have to retain your objectivity, you know, because else you've got an interest in the result. You know, if you're innovating, I think that will violate your need to be objective. So despite my desire for partnership and bedfellows, I think there has to be a line between referee and player. And you have to keep that right. In your context of being a referee, if you're innovative, I think that's great. But I think the innovation should be in the context of governance, objectivity, raising issues, and not crossing the line. I hope that's appropriate.
All right, thank you very much. We're running up behind time a bit, so I'm going to, if with your permission, Cindy, move on to the next item on the agenda, but you have some token of appreciation.
Yes, and before that...
You're offline.
Am I offline?
Am
I already fired from stage? Okay. No, before that, I'm just saying the topic we had in the morning is how audit committees can keep up with the pace of growth and innovation in business. And I just want confirmation from you, because from my view, I think that question has been answered. I need a confirmation from you of whether you think you've really got your answers. Please give then our keynote speaker a big round of applause. And Adrian, I just want you to thank you for sharing this time with us. We know you are a very busy person. We've got this small token of appreciation for you to remember us. Now, this moment is very rare. Can I just have a photograph, please? I will never share the stage with Adrian. Thank you. You are envious, I know. All right, then.
It's official. Auditors have a heart. Okay. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Let's go.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and for sharing your insights, and congratulations on your business. I'm sure it will continue to grow.